Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast, Conversations with Silicon Valley's Creatives. I'm Daniel Garcia, your host and the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates. Hello, welcome to the Content Magazine podcast. I'm Daniel Garcia, the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates, and we are here in the studio today with Danielle Siembieda, and she is a alter eco artist, as among other things. But why don't you first kind of explain what an alter eco artist is?
That's a good question. It's a term that helps me define myself. I grew up as an environmentalist and an activist, but then I went and did my MFA in digital media art. I did not fit into your typical new media artist. I was not really a coder or a data visualization person or a gamer or an animator, but I really did love technology and how I could use that and apply that and investigate it. And then as an environmentalist and an artist, I didn't feel like I fit in either into the eco art spectrum, environmental artists who were doing land art or representational work or looking at really more of the ecological side of things. So I really felt there wasn't a place for me in the spectrum of art to be either an eco artist or a new media artist or digital artist. Yeah. So I really put myself in this position as an alter eco artist, really thinking about the area, a specialty that I wanted to investigate and understand, really, which is more on the side of how environment and technology connect with one another. Okay.
Yeah. So environment and technology. Okay. So let's talk about how you got to that point, because you talked about like you didn't feel like you fit into the normal kind of like new media or the maybe like an environmental artist and stuff like that. So first of all, did you grow up in Albuquerque, New Mexico? Is that kind of like where you grew up?
I did. I'm a Albuquerqueña at heart. Okay. Yeah. Yes, but I've been out in California for a long time, so I identify with both.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So then you grew up there, and then were you doing art in there, or like what was...
Yeah, I grew up, that was my thing. You know, I grew up with an art studio from a very young age as a child, really looking at art and entrepreneurship and environment. I was really started out doing activism very young, like around maybe... as soon as I could write, really. As soon as I could write, around 9 and 10 years old, I started doing letter writing campaigns focusing on the environment. I joined my first board position at the age of like 15. I was pretty ballsy. I would write to the president and, you know, people who I would have my strategic plan for how to save the planet and send that out.
As a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
So then, but were you in the household that had like kind of like a lot of like art, creativity, entrepreneurship, and even like activism in there? Or did you just somehow got the bug from watching Dora the Explorer?
Neither of my parents I would consider to be activists. My dad was an urban planner, was fairly creative and was very supportive of me doing and creating artwork, and had built me an art studio at a very young age.
So what does that what's that art studio look like? What do you mean? Like?
Well, so we lived in New Mexico. Everybody lives on like there's land there. It's not like California, and we had multiple sheds. So we had probably like 5-6 sheds. I don't remember how many. He converted one of those into an art studio, and what he would do is he was a big flea market guy, garage sale guy, so he would go and just acquire art supplies and anything that he can find that you can make something with at the flea markets. And so I had spinning wheels, I had wax, I had paints, I had easels. So a lot of this stuff was just really secondhand, taken down the road, you know, and being in the studio was one of my major outlets. But it was also a place where you had a lot of and ecological things around you, like a lot of insects in New Mexico and Albuquerque, a lot of horses, a lot of dogs. We didn't have horses ourselves, but all of our neighbors did. I think we were the only home that didn't, llamas, this was just how it was. And then there was also a lot of encouragement to participate in things. So I participated from elementary school all the way on in something called the Harvest Festival Poster Contest. I think that was my first time I won anything. And that just sort of really started to make me think. And they will let you sell if you were under 18, they would let you actually sell your artwork at the Harvest Festival. So that was always sort of like an outlet for me. I was always prepare work for the year and sell it when I was like in middle school.
What were you selling? Like, what were you creating and selling?
Well, I remember one time I took found sticks and I took logs and I drilled into the logs and I painted the sticks and I stuck them in and make little sculptures. Another time I got really into candle sculptures, and so I would find anything and create any mold I could and make candles out of them. And I ruined our fireplace because I would heat the wax on top of the fireplace. We had one of the ones where you could put like a kettle on.
Oh yeah, like a
and that's how I act.
Thing,
so I would light the wood burning stove, melt the wax, make the candle. That ruined the fireplace, but I would sell those then at the market, and that's.
Did you do like the molds in the sand? I
did the molds in the sand, and eggs, and cups, and anything I could find.
Yeah, totally. Well, so definitely, I mean, so that environment, obviously, I mean, that's like completely like, like multi-discipline genre exploration and creativity and stuff like that. So then you're doing that. You got a taste of success and awards. Did you then? So when you went to college, were you in like art field?
No, I went to college for journalism.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I went to school in Missouri, and where they have a really good journalism school out there. But I really got into activism at a much deeper level. I was very involved in a lot of direct action events, IMF protests, and that stands for International Monetary Fund, and World Bank protests, and Women's March, and then got really deeply involved in Amnesty International. And I would go out to Washington, D.C. often. I would go to Capitol Hill. I got trained by the D.C. office and made a lot of really good lifetime friends through that process. But really, in that, also really focused on activists and people who were defending their land, like whether that was in Nigeria or Mexico, just sort of really understanding how corporations have a global effect and how they really impact those communities that and the threat that happens. So really got into human rights pretty deeply in college. As part of that process.
So then after you graduated from Missouri, did you then get into that kind of field of activism or like policy or writing, journalism?
Actually, I didn't do a policy or journalism after college. I actually was a community organizer for a few years. So I was a community organizer in Missouri, and then I moved to San Diego and was a community organizer out there.
What brought you to San Diego?
My family had then moved out to California.
Okay, so
by
they
that,
Mexico,
So that point they moved out to California, and I was just really looking to get out of Missouri, and I found a job in San Diego. So I went out there and I worked for a multi-service organization that had a HUD housing development, and really working with mostly people from the Horn of Africa, from Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and then Mexico, and then a few other folks mixed in with that. So it was a very beautiful community, but also dealt with a lot of really difficult impacts from basically what a lot of people deal with who are refugees or immigrants into that environment.
So then how did you go from that to going to, because then from there you went to San Jose State, right? For a MF in digital art and multimedia. Or how did you go from working in that kind of environment to transferring over to San Jose State for MFA?
Well, I really learned a lot about broken systems in San Diego. the multi-service organization that I was working for really was not helping people the way that they wanted to be helped, and that really bothered me. And we couldn't do the things that they wanted to see. And
so when you say multi-service, you mean some that's doing housing, education, rehabilitation, location, housing, like all those kind of things? Okay.
Yeah, they did a lot of different programs, but when it came to like doing the community piece, they really couldn't give back what the community was asking. And
which I'm curious, what do you mean? Like, what are they
like? I guess like a small example would be where you have a lot of people from the Horn of Africa. There's no radio station that really plays that music from that area. And this was a time where there wasn't a lot of Wi-Fi streaming like there is now. Okay. Now you can get a lot of Wi-Fi streaming of from anywhere. But at that time, they really didn't have an opportunity to communicate with each other. And so what they said was, okay, we want to have a radio station. And it was very cheap to get the radio station up and going. It would have only cost $1,000 to buy the antenna. Wow. And we could have had a radio station for the whole site. But there was like, you go through one approval and then it goes up the ladder, and then the person on the top says, no, we don't want to do that. And then you have to go tell the community,
Is this
sorry.
a radio station in the Horn of Africa, or here in San Diego area for refugees and immigrants?
It would have been at the location. It was 300 units, 300 homes.
Okay.
And it would have only met that geographic area. And we had a community center area. They let me paint the community center walls, but they wouldn't let me furnish it.
Okay. So just weird red tape and decision making. Yeah.
So what I did from there is I went through a creative realization, creative journey. I did a workshop using the Artist Way. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with the Artist Way, it is a program/book by a writer named Julia Cameron. I call it like the 12-step program to get back. Yeah. And it was taught by this wonderful creativity wizard, Earl Storm, who isn't with us anymore. But he incorporated the Artist Way in a beautiful way, bringing in The Wizard of Oz, Jim Morrison, musicals, toys, and he had a cartoon with a queer duck that would talk about politics, and he was just like just a charming person and really helped me so much and made me realize that I was hitting so much toxicity in this environment. And if I really wanted to do something in terms of helping people out, I couldn't do it in this form that I was doing it in, which was like really, I was positioned there not to really make progress, but to be just a face. When I realized that I could make these interventions, like I could do social work. I could play around with the experiment of like law or medicine or science, but I didn't have to do it with the gravitas that somebody who has to go through the typical accreditation was. I could comment on it and I could explore it through the lens of art. And I was able to remove those roadblocks of trying to do things in a certain pathway and start to build it for my own. And so at that point, I was looking for graduate schools to go to. I was taking some art classes. I got back to taking art classes, sculptural stuff, had a painting portfolio. Wow. I didn't want to touch politics at that time. Also, George Bush got elected a second time, which I was really
excited
upset
about.
Excited. I wouldn't say excited. I was so depressed. I get depressed every election.
Yeah.
I will say I have a very bad track record for post-election depression, as I think a lot of people do right now.
Yeah, I always still feel. I don't think I've ever elected a president. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
So I was like, okay, well, I've got to do something about this. And I was making art, really just did not want to touch anything political. I also, by the way, this is another thing. On top of being a community organizer, I was living in an activist co-op.
Oh, okay.
And
that sounds interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and it was infiltrated by the FBI.
Oh, dang. And this is like what year?
This was
80,
like 2000. No, this
90?
is 2000 and I would say this is 2004.
Wow. So actually infiltrated by the FBI. So they had somebody posing as a activist, undercover, came in. But were you able to, did you guys identify the person immediately?
I did, but the difficult part of it was not just one person. It was like we literally had an FCC truck parked out, or it was actually a car. It was a sedan parked outside 24/7.
It's like surveillance and like all that. How crazy. Yeah.
Our phones were tapped, and it was like legit tap. Like you can like pull it, like pick up the phone and you can hear.
Yeah. And what were you like? What kind of activism type stuff were you guys doing that would warrant like the FBI? Like, were you trying to smuggle weapons in or something?
Well, there was like I had roommates who were called into federal grand jury because there was like an incident where, like there were some people who were I forgot what they had a name. They had they were like doing things to condo developments and.
Okay.
And
like vandalizing or something like that. Oh, okay. So they were pretty.
Yeah, we had
on that radical.
Mm-hmm. And then one of my other roommates, she was like campaigning for the Peace and Freedom Party, and I think that was also targeted.
Wow.
We just had it was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And it was just like. We lived in an incredibly diverse community in City Heights where you had 256 dialects spoken in that community. It was a beautiful place, but it was just extremely uncomfortable in terms of just the reality of having to deal with that and the stress that it brought on, and then dealing with like the personalities that come through that. And I think just like dealing with what the reality is when we give up our privacy and we vote on that, or we have our elected officials voting on. And actually, just to this is gonna come back to in a little bit. But what always got me thinking was like we in 2004 the Congress passed the this act. Right now I can't remember the name of it, but it was like to allow for the government to spy on us. It was a 600-page document that had been sitting in somebody's like to-do list file that they passed overnight.
Oh my goodness.
And when I realized that they were passing that overnight, it made me really question who read this 600-page document in one day. I can't read 600 pages in a day.
Yeah.
And this is heavy policy text.
Yeah.
And so that really opened up the opportunity for all this stuff to happen. And it was really, really difficult to be there. And so when I decided to like leave what I was doing, leave this house and start applying to graduate schools, I was looking up and down California and a couple of other locations. But San Jose, when I came here, I interviewed with the former director of the Cadre Media Lab at San Jose State, Joel Slayton, and we had a very long conversation, and he said, I don't want to see your portfolio. I'm not interested in your portfolio. I want you to just be honest with me and tell me, you know, what is it that you want to do? And I said, well, I want to do something where I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. And he said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I'm uncomfortable in positions that pigeonhole me. I said, I'm a creative person and I'm a natural leader. And on my former job at that multi-service organization, I had a boss that said to me, look, you're a really creative person. And I said, okay. And he said, we don't want that.
Okay.
And said, we're going to put you in a box so you cannot be creative anymore. Wow. And that was it. That was, I'm done. Yeah. I was like, I am out of here.
Yeah. It's not the kind of work environment you want to be where like, don't be yourself.
Yeah. And I realized that I just couldn't survive that way. So when I said, these are the two things that I want to do, I was like, I said, I want to do something really out there. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know this is how I am. And that's, when I got accepted into to go to San Jose State. And I like the fact that everyone there was doing something very different, very weird, very off the typical art spectrum. It was imaginative. It was community based. There was no rules behind it, and I really needed that. I needed to be in a place like that.
Yeah, that's cool. So what would you say then? Okay, that's 20 years ago or whatever, I guess now. What would you say as you look at the things that you've done and been involved in from that time when you sat with Joel? What are a couple things that stand out to you as like, wow, I didn't know that I was going to do, but these things really kind of hit what I was hoping to do? Is there a couple projects, I don't know, like the Post People project, the kombucha type thing that you like, or anything like that is like, wow, you know what, I'm finding my voice, or
I feel like over the years I've started to be able to get into things and explore things. Like I feel like I'm interested in everything. I think part of it is that I'm not the great on doing just one thing. I really like exploring. I've come to realization now, like thinking about like, how do I actually talk about this? What do I say is that I'm a systems artist in a lot of ways. I look at these complex systems, and how do we look at complex systems like the economy, like climate science, like how do we visualize the number 8 trillion, which is like what the government gave to the banks in 2008. Like, how do we actually really do this so the public can understand it? And I don't have to stay in one exploration way or another, but I would say kind of arcing from those times when I was in graduate school at San Jose State exploring to where I am now. I would say there was 2 sort of things that come out and really made that transformation. The first one was in graduate school, I started this project called The Art Inspector, Saving the Earth by Changing by changing art. Right, and this was a way to lower the carbon impact of the arts and cultural sector, but it was very divisive at that time. And when I presented it from the faculty and graduate students, which is what is required to do, we divided the room. People were yelling at each other across the room.
You actually went to a few artist studios, and then like did tests on the chemicals that they were using, right? I mean, that was Oh, sorry. So keep going.
I had a persona, and I had a camera crew follow me around with a reality show. I created a rubric, a way to do an assessment, and I did that because during graduate school I took classes. Not just at San Jose State. I took life cycle engineering classes there. I took green materials classes at UC Berkeley, and then I went to the PG&E had a learning center for architects and contractors. It was called the Pacific Energy Center. It was up in San Francisco, and they had a whole lab there, toolkits and everything you can use there. And so I took all their classes. I learned how to do energy auditing, and I learned how to use their tools and use their lab. And they had an amazing lighting lab there. And so what I did is I created this whole way of learning and applying this. And I would just show up at artist studios, and I would get people calling me freaked out, or and then I actually had somebody in grad school try to petition to get me kicked out. They were so worried about what I was doing.
Well, that's right. I mean, like, I imagine the acrylics and the oils that we're using, and even like the paint thinners and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's tons of chemicals. Like I mean, digital photography is great now, but I built a dark room, and then I've been starting to do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like the amount of water, the chemicals, it's like really kind of crazy when you think about, So, okay, so you did the art inspection.
Yeah, I did that. And then I was also interested in like renewable energy, renewable technologies. And so those 2 projects have really come back again in my life, in the way that it's come back. The Art Inspector has come back is in a whole new way, and that's with the City of San Jose's climate art program, which is I would call it maybe Art Inspector like 4.0. It's like
were you kind of the impetus with the city to kind of like get the that going, like the yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I designed that and got it funded, and then with the renewable energy piece of it, I've been working on with a collaborative team that we have come up with a microgrid artistic platform called Flyline that we're currently looking to still site, but we designed it for Burning Man's Fly Ranch location.
That's the water, the fountain.
Yeah, you see like an artesian well.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool. So then, what is that exactly? Then with the Flyline, what exactly does that involve then?
So the Flyline is it's both the public artwork, it's a microgrid, it's a multi-directional microgrid, it's a research lab and a performance platform. So basically, it's a modular way to think about how to not tread on ecological lands, like wetlands is a great example, and then how to like incorporate this in a way where you can actually change and narrate different types of stories on site, whether that be creating a experience with a sound gate, what we call the resonate gate, where you walk through it and you hear sound and emotion going through, and then performance spaces on that site, looking at other architectural features that include solar and colors, an illuminated boardwalk that camouflages during the day and lightly illuminates with a bioluminescent material at night. Yeah.
And is the goal in these kind of projects then, I mean, I guess one is, like you kind of say, is to kind of to illustrate and explain like those different, like the economy, the ecology, like those kind of systems and stuff like that. But then also for the sake of, I mean, you're an activist, right? So to provoke change, right? I mean, would you say at the end of what you're really doing, you're trying to cause people to think and change?
Yeah, I'm very interested in behavior change and thinking about thinking about human behavior. What would trigger us to actually do something? There's a psychologist at Stanford named BJ Fogg, and he created this system about change and thinking about like the motivation and the trigger and the action that needs to happen, and that is what you see mastered in some of like the apps that we use, right? Like TikTok is a great example, and so thinking about what are those simplified ways, because people do things based on their emotional reaction, but you have to make that ability to happen, and part of it is like translating what everything looks like, and some of it is slow. You need to take the time to make something slow, and some of it is going to be quick, and some of it's going to be humorous. And I try not to do so much on the fearful side. I try to stay. I do love comedy, and I like comedic art. I like intervention art, so that does inspire me to think of that like that.
Yeah. I mean, so then I was just thinking as you were talking, like there's only two real motivations, right? Pleasure or pain, right? If it's going to hurt me or if I enjoy it.
Right.
Right? I mean, would you say like, yeah.
In certain ways, but I think that there's other sort of subconscious approaches to things that can happen.
Yeah, you would think that you would hope that our motivation would be for the care of each other and the planet, right?
I think some people are motivated by that. I personally am. Like
I'm not.
Yeah.
No. I hope I am too. Yeah. Okay, so talk about the comedy. So then is the character that you've created, your kind of like metamorphosis, kind of like alter personality art project, the Jean Gnome, is that done then? It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek play on social media. Like explain that. Explain that project and character.
Right. Okay. So Jean Gnome is a Morpheus character, I guess, or another alter ego that lives in social media, that changes shape and explores the human and non-human world. So learns through scientists and artists and other species, and has taken multiple forms. It started out as just a cellular organism, looking at just trying to understand genomics. And I started this project while I was an artist in residence at the UC Santa Cruz Genomics Institute that's supported by the Open Lab there. And I worked with different scientists like Dr. Hausler, who founded the Human Genome Project, the genome browser that's still used today all over the world. And just like I did this because I was staring at this genome browser and trying to read genomics papers and looking at these taxomes and this language that I was really unfamiliar with. But trying to figure out a way, how do I talk about this, and how do I talk about this so people can like get it? And I think the influencer piece was really interesting to me, to think about genome as an influencer and how can genome anthropomorphize some of the stuff. And by the way, it's spelled Jean, and then the second name, Gnome, Gnome. So it's just a play on words. Yeah. And right now you can see genome as a tube worm that lives at the bottom of the ocean on thermal vents. And I was really interested in these extremophiles, right? And like how we're going to have to understand this. I love biomimicry, and I love this idea of extremophiles, which are organisms that can live in extreme environments like outer space or like in a volcano or the bottom of the sea. Like, how do we actually talk about this, but in a way that people can understand it? And so that's where Genome was created.
So Genome can morph over time, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then is it kind of like, is it kind of like writing a book in a way where you have the character and then you're starting to tell a story and then you're seeing it move in different directions? Or are you kind of like, oh, the next thing I'm going to do is already this? Or how's that how's that morphine happening?
I think part of it comes with conversations and based on what I learn and what I'm exploring. Like, I'm using the tool of Instagram just as much as I'm putting it out there. Like, I'm actually learning about so many different really interesting species on Instagram, and I share some of those out, usually through stories. And then I create these filters for people that I'm interviewing. Or they could be artists or scientists or hybrid artist scientists that are doing some of this work, and just like learning about what they're thinking about and their research, and that inspires me to create it into some other form, and then to participate as Genome in the discourse. So looking at connecting into scientific communities. Like a few years ago, I participated in a whole like pure science conference, and I came in just as Genome talking about the Riftia pachypatilla. That was before it was created, and like, how do I make that happen, right? And
so that's just happening online in the digital space. Or you actually do you put on a costume and
no?
It's all just like a digital influencer.
Right. I create digital avatars that I use through one of Meta's products that are actually now discontinuing. So I'm going to have to recreate this in a different way. But and then sometimes I do have a Zoom version of it too. If I have to go into a Zoom meeting as Genome, I have my own version of that. But yeah,
that's cool. Well, good. So you talked about like sense of humor, stuff like that. What do you, and as an activist and the artist that's doing this kind of stuff, what do you do for fun? What's your kind of like outside of work? I mean, you're doing your art projects, and then you have stuff with the city of San Jose, which we'll ask you about that in a second. What do you do outside? Like, what's kind of like your kind of fun?
For fun, it's a good question. I love being outdoors. Like, I love hiking. I have a German Shepherd. I'll go anywhere with him, and I just like exploring and traveling. I'm a big avid traveler. If I can, I will travel. Yeah. So those are probably the two of the major things.
What's a place you like to hike around here in the Bay Area? What's one of your?
Well, I like hiking in the Oakland Hills. I like the redwoods. I'm a big fan of sequoias and redwoods, and just the canopies. I feel like I'm a mountain girl. I do also love rivers. So I feel like my water is river. So everybody has like a water, and my water is a river. I grew up on the river, so
does that must also then inform your art practice, right? Because all the bacterias and all the life that's from trees to water. Do you find yourself getting ideas as you're...
Yeah, I think I definitely get inspired by form and shape. I know there's like a scientist scholar, Darcy Thompson, who wrote a book about, I think it was called Form and Shape. I'm not saying the book name correctly, but looking at how like forms and shapes within nature mathematically and scientifically really can influence art overall, like thinking about like the Fibonacci curve. So when I look at pretty much all the time when I'm on my walks, I'm always looking at species, and I'm looking at flora and fauna and looking for things and thinking about that. Yeah. I just like that opportunity to just really come outside of myself and think about what are all these things, how are they coexisting together, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. So then, so I just want to read this. So as the alter eco artist, it says like in your bio and stuff like that, was like working at the intersection of emerging technology, community, and the environment. So I think you've kind of like touched on that. I think that's. Do you want to add anything about that? About those three kind of, the intersection of emerging technology, community, and environment?
Right. I feel like I'll just mention on the technology side. I think technology is a tool. Everything I do, I don't really have an initial media that I decide this is going to end up looking like this. Right. The reason I don't do that is because I like to do the investigation and the experimentation and ask the questions and the collaboration. And I used to work for an art and science think tank that really like push
Leonardo,
that.
Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I really that opportunity to think about what is in between, and then technology does help within that, being able to sort of identify that. But then there's also some times where the investigation is about the technology. As an example is in the renewable energy sector, there's very little artistic design incorporated into thinking about things like carbon offsets or energy information systems or solar or wind. What you see is very engineer driven. It's not community designed. It's not art designed. And there is a group now that's trying to push that called climate designers. But I think that's a really interesting area to disrupt as an artist, and an area to push in those questions, and thinking similarly around materials and green chemistry and emerging materials that are looking at biomimicry. How do we actually look at that? And then maybe using AI tools or using the other kind of graphic design, video tools, coding that you can use to realize whatever it is that you're doing. So
to
I look
simulate and then eventually create. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so then now with the City of San Jose, like one, how did you get to, your position is creative, what's your title?
Senior Program Manager on the Arts Industry Support Team in the Office of Economic Development and Cultural Affairs. That's a very long title.
I think the acronym of that is like, what?
Yeah. I don't really like to, nobody knows what that means. So
what does it mean? What do you do
then? So my purview is I focus on the creative economy and cultural engagement.
Okay.
So how do I really support the growth of creatives and arts businesses within San Jose? Yeah. And then how do we actually get the public to engage with our cultural sector?
Yeah, okay. And then how did you come to that position? You've been now for how many years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So and did you come right from Leonardo to this?
I did, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So how did that kind of go down? I mean, I don't want to like get anybody in trouble or anything. Like, well, what, did they poach you, or you were looking to move, or...
Pandemic burnout, right? With everything. I mean, I actually do love everybody at Leonardo still, and they're all friends, and I do still find myself to be very involved with that community. But I think for me, leaving there was really about just I wanted to be, and I was just burnt out. It was just like working a lot. But with San Jose, I have had a past relationship with the city in a few different ways. I sat on the public art committee for a while. I also project managed a project with the Cultural Affairs Department and Montalvo and 01. It was called the climate. It was it the San Jose Climate Clock Initiative, which was a 3-year-long project.
Yeah.
And so I kept in touch with everybody over time, and just like, saw what was happening in San Jose. I always enjoyed what the city had done. And then when this opportunity came up, I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but like there were people from the city that did come up to me and say, you should take a look at this. This is something that you probably would like to do. And and so now here I am.
Yeah. So then, and with the job, I forgot what you said. It's the creative director of the economic. Well, so with the whole title, what do you? So then you're trying to help bring awareness to the arts, and then, but what's some of the projects that you've been working on? You touched on the.
Yeah, so like I manage what's called the Create and Connect portfolio. And that portfolio is the Creative Ambassadors, the Creative Economy Fund, the Make Music Day, We Create 4-8, and then right outside of that, there's also the San Jose Climate Art Program, and then a little bit of curating with like the Sonic Runway, and then any other projects that come up that are more maybe on the curatorial basis.
Yeah.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's it like then, having been an artist who's creating, and in a very kind of like academic and thoughtful, I think a lot of investigation and research art, and then also to be working in the arts field? How do you balance all that, and energy and thought and emotions?
I get it. I mean, it's great because I love working with artists. I do get inspired a lot, and it makes me want to make more and make more time for it, and really starting to see where some of that support comes from. I do think that there's, I don't know, I guess like it is always a balance. I'm also a full-time mother, and so I mean there is that balance, but this is like, I don't feel like I could live without making art. Like I need, like I don't have, it's not in some ways it's not an option. Yeah. It's like it's a way of life, and so like I am every day inspired by the people I work with, and so I'm very blessed to be able to have that opportunity and to encourage that and support that of other artists. And then I just have to make the time to make the work myself. And then that's also over the time been helpful, because I think those relationships also create those opportunities. Right?
Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Mom, artist, and working in the... that is nice, though, to be able to be an artist and work with other artists. Gives you insight to what they're dealing with. At the same time, you do get inspired.
I mean, like, what about you? I mean, you're also like that, too. I mean, you're constantly around creative people all the day long.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. But I find that I end up not doing as much of what I would want to do for my own kind of, like, art and creativity. Mainly because my wife makes me do a lot of chores around the house. But that's good. That's good. I'm not complaining. Sorry, Sarah. Okay, so are you much of a reader? Are you an avid reader? Do you read fiction, nonfiction, and what's something that you read lately?
I'm not I like magazines more than I read books. I do like a lot of new media theory, and I am much more of an academic reader than I am a casual reader. I'll be honest.
What's something that you read somewhat recently, that in that space?
Right. Oh, and I do like science fiction too, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I guess like I actually was talking about this earlier today, and I'm going back to this book due to the recent events last week. There's this book called The Road to Unfreedom by Timothy Snyder.
The Road to
Unfreedom.
Unfreedom. Ooh.
Yeah, and he's a scholar who researches the Soviet Union and Russia and its position, and it's like evolution in history, and just thinking about sort of this polarity of thought, and thinking about this in a cyclical manner. Like, how do you actually reason and understand the history of and philosophy of why things have been done the way they are, and where that roadmap is going. And understanding like the reasoning of some of this information, like difficult information, I think is helpful to put things into context and inspiring for me and conceptually to think about like, how do I actually then push up against it a little bit?
Yeah.
Right.
If you were to kind of like just think whatever, like what issue, if you were to create a project, what issue would you figure is the most important issue for you and your voice to do a project on, like a creative project? What would it be?
What issue? That's a really good question. I have a project. I don't want to say too much.
Yeah. You can keep it encrypted.
I do think that I think it's important for the public to understand how some of the functions that those who are in supreme power and wealth are getting there and how they got there. And it's definitely not the way that all of us know how to do or the road that we got there. There's definitely some, like I see there's a line that is a legal line, and then right below it is right thinly above it is an ethic line.
Sure.
And then because people are fine not being ethical to do things. And I think if people understood how that was done and then people started to do those same things, then there would be a different conversation if everybody started to play in that same field. Yeah. I don't want to go too deep into it on this podcast, but
sure.
That's an offline topic. I have a future plan, but I can talk about the current project I have, which I'm excited about, which is the Cultural Commentary Project. Maybe a little bit lighter.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been interested in doing this. I've kind of evolved this over the years. It's a project called the Cultural Commentary Project. And think about it this way, is that last week we saw the entire country divided, and a lot of that was based on information that was given, both disinformation, but done in a commercial, a 15-second commercial, a headline, a tweet, a post, and a TikTok reel. It didn't get into actually anything that was true, like that was surface, right? That was below the surface, which is how things are scaffolded, how things are built, what different policies are, what the truth is, like what are and there's not two sides to a story. There's like a dozen sides to a story, right? And there's not two players. There's multiple players, and so this like reduction of information has really just hurt us tremendously. And the reduction of information, how do we actually combat that? And so thinking about public policy and as something that is how money gets distributed, it's how decisions get made, it's how laws get built, and it's something that we're so disconnected from, right? And so how do we actually deal with that? And so the Cultural Commentary Project is a way to address that, to move away from the headlines into what the actual policy is. And I see artists in artwork as like an interface to that. Artists have the capability and understanding of how to look at complex information, how to think through it, and how to respond to it in a creative and in an empathic way. And so the Cultural Commentary Project invites small groups of people to get together, and anyone can do this. Like, you do not have to come to me to do this. You could do this on your own. So if you're listening to this, go ahead and do this. Just credit me, but go ahead and do it. But you get a group of people together, go on to the website regulations.gov. That's the federal website that has tons of notices and rules and policies open for public comment. Pick one. Read through the whole entire thing. Some things are short, some things are long. Look at the supplemental information. Get your friends together, talk about it, and then create artwork. Create a song, do a short reel, make an illustration, write a poem, write like a short story, respond to it, cite what you're doing, but really kind of think about what the whole thing is. Look for those loopholes, look for the areas that you don't understand, and then submit those comments, and then those artworks then become the interface for that policy. So if somebody is looking at, like, I'll give you an example of one we recently did, which was the bureau, in the executive branch, they have like the Bureau of Budget Management. They're trying to decide how they are going to purchase commercial data to use with our personal information and to use for AI for all the different departments in the federal government.
Nice.
And they're asking us, the public, what do you think we should do? Well, let's tell them, and let's read through this, and let's do our research, and we can submit that as artwork. And when we submit that as artwork, that then becomes the interface for that for the other public, right? If they don't understand what this is, they can look at the artwork as what it is. And then the legislative analyst, the person on the other side who catalogs and puts in context all the comments, then becomes a curator and has to actually then curate the artwork to support or ignore or refute a piece of that policy. And ideally one day we would see some of this artwork come to the floor of Congress, but disrupting
because that artwork is sharing the information in a way that's palatable, like I said, empathetic. And so I'm a cynic. Like, they have that portal with all this kind of stuff, and it goes to this person who's the curator. Quite honestly, I feel like they just put that out there because legally they just have to take comments, but they don't really care, and then they just do what they want.
They legally have to read comments. So if you're trying to look at why does this 600-page policy create this whole thing for, I don't know, a very, very narrow niche specific industry that's going to make billions of dollars off of the policy, that's because they are lobbyists. Yeah. Put that comment in there, and then that comment then gets added into the policy. Well, what if the comments that get added into the policy are from us? Right. The only people who read this policy are these advocacy organizations like Greenpeace, who read through it and send you an email that says sign your comment, and then they send that out and they said 10,000 people said the same comment. Or it could be a lobbyist that says, okay, here's the comment because we want this money and we want this we want this opportunity to be easier for us. Yeah. But there isn't us. Well, one is it's beyond just having those comments read. It's us being able to move away from the headlines. Right. This headline will upset you. All right. So the headlines are there to trigger us. They're gaslighting. They're fuel. But we don't understand what's going on in this country at all. I mean, it's clear. We had half of the entire country vote against their own interests. Yeah. Okay. So if you understood what the policy was and the different sides of it, there would be a very different conversation that's happening. And you can
hopefully different candidates.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that would be nice too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, then tell me, so then is this part of the WEAD, the Women Eco Artist Dialog? Is that what you're talking about there? Is that a part of this that you're doing in December?
Well, I first wrote about it, this piece a few years ago as an open source project for WEAD, but I'm implementing it now. And WEAD is it's been around for a long time. It's an eco art organization that's been around for decades that really was spurred out of the ecofeminist movement of the 70s. But this is part of a exhibition that's going to be happening on December 16th at Root Division by curator Yudi Narvital, and it's focused on what they call the phygital communities, like physical and digital communities. So how do you actually kind of combine that physical and digital? Yeah. So the participating in this in these weekly participatory cultural commentary gatherings allows us to look at different comments and then submit those. And then those will be in exhibition in December. And we'll do one in San Jose on December 6th in downtown. So people can reach out to me if they're interested in participating in that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. So last thing, what do you listen to? What's your music style and flavor? What do you listen to to kind of like to...
That's a good question. I'm pretty broad. I would say I lean towards things that have amazing percussion. What have I been I've been pretty melancholy this last week, so everything has been like, Elliott Smith and, like very sad music. But yeah, I mean, I listen to electronica, Britpop, Latin, French, hip hop.
What would you say is your favorite artist of all time?
I'm not good at favorites. I don't do favorites. Okay. But let me think about
something that you come back to. You find what's the one that the DJ X on Spotify forces down your throat all the time?
Okay. Moby's Play album.
Oh, okay.
I think like if that could be my soundtrack. I think Moby's Play album, and then I could fall asleep every night to REM's Automatic for the People.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Good. All right. Plug again to the camera all your. This is. I feel like I'm on the Hot Wings guy. Like to this camera, this camera, this camera. But just say like how to find you, how to follow you, and then also about the December 16th.
Okay. I'm Danielle Siembieda. You can follow me on Instagram at Alter Eco Artist or Jean Gnome Art, JeanGnomeArt. And you can look at my website, Siembieda.com, Siembieda.com. And join me on December 6th in downtown San Jose to participate in the Cultural Commentary Project. And then come check out the exhibition at Root Division starting December 16th through the beginning of January. And that will be a really fantastic show. So please do come down and check that out. And thank you.
Good. Awesome. Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out and talking.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the South Bay creatives. This episode's music is 408 by Jack Pavlina. Follow him on Spotify and also on his Instagram at Jack Pavlina Music.